Each week, we take a look at a story in the Bible, and right now, we're talking about stories of Jesus. Now, there are tons of stories of Jesus, like stories of him teaching and stories of him helping people, but right now, we're taking a look at a special group of stories that show the incredible things Jesus did. Today's story is called the Transfiguration. Jesus and a few of his disciples went up onto a mountain, and when they got to the top, Jesus transformed right in front of their eyes. He was glowing like a bright light, and they heard the voice of God talk about his son Jesus and how pleased he was with Jesus and that we should listen to him. Jesus goes on to talk about his death and resurrection just after the Transfiguration. When he talks about this, he's showing us more about the way his kingdom works. We're going to be talking about what this means a little bit later. If we're going to be a part of this new kingdom, it's going to require some trust. That's why today we're saying, every day I can trust Jesus. Before we talk about that, we're going to sing a song together. So go ahead and stand up and sing this out with us as loud as you can.
All around the world, listen up right now because I got something to say and it will be heard. I made up my mind, not afraid to show. That's right, gonna leave the past behind, gonna let the whole world know I am who God says I am. Let me tell you that I am who God says I am. Forgiven, I am a winner, I have been chosen. Jesus, I am yours. Jesus, I am yours. Forever. Jesus, I am yours. Forever. I am, Jesus, I am yours. Says I am. I am who God says I am. Let's go. I am who God says I am. 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 I am forgiven. I am a winner. I have been chosen. Jesus, I am yours. Jesus, I am yours. I belong to the one who saved me. I belong to the one who gave his life. So I will take my place. I will stand and say, Jesus, I am yours. I belong to the one who saved me. I belong to the one who gave his life. So I will take my place. I will stand and say, Jesus, I am who God says I am. 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 You know I am who God says I am. I am who God says I am.
You guys sounded so good. Thank you for singing along with us. Now we're going to take some time to watch a Bible story together. And like I said earlier, today we're going to be looking at the story of the Transfiguration. So let's check it out.
It's time for a Bible story. This story happened about 2,000 years ago when Jesus was here on the earth. One day, Jesus went up to a high mountain and brought a few of his disciples with him, Peter, James, and John.
Nice, going on a little hiking trip, huh? See the great outdoors, climb a mountain, maybe do a little fishing of men. Get it?
Yeah, I get it. But that's not why they went up onto the mountain. It was way more important than just a hiking trip. Jesus wanted to show them something incredible. When they got up to the top of the mountain, Jesus' appearance changed. The Bible says that his face shone bright like the sun, and his clothes became white as light.
Whoa, I hope they brought their sunglasses, or they'd be all like, my eyes!
Yeah, sunglasses weren't really a thing back then.
Right, they probably just got all squinty then, huh?
Probably. But then something else happened. Two other men appeared before them and started talking to Jesus.
Wait, hold up. Who are these guys? Where'd they come from?
The other two men were Moses and the prophet Elijah.
Whoa, wait a minute. Weren't those guys around, way earlier than Jesus was on the earth? Okay, you're getting my timelines all mixed up. This is some straight-up Infinity War, time-traveling, next-level multiverse stuff.
Calm down. It's not that complicated. Yes, Moses and Elijah were both alive a long time before Jesus was on earth. But they appeared on the mountain with Jesus that day.
Okay, what happened next? I bet Peter, James, and John were totally amped to see that happen.
They totally were. In fact, Peter wanted to build 3 memorials right there on the mountain. One for Jesus, one for Moses, and one for Elijah.
Classic Peter.
But right after he said that, something else happened. A bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him."
Wait, was that God's voice that said that?
You got it.
Oh man, that would be pretty powerful to hear.
Oh, it definitely was. When the voice of God said that about Jesus, the disciples fell face down on the ground, terrified.
Well, yeah, I've done that just when my mom calls my name from across the house.
I know, right? Especially when they use your middle name. That's when you know it's game over.
Okay, so we got Jesus shining like the sun, Moses and Elijah hanging out, glowing clouds, the voice of God. What happened next?
As the disciples were on the ground, Jesus came up and touched them and said, "Don't be afraid. Get up." When they looked up, everything else was gone, and it was just Jesus standing before them. Then, as they traveled down the mountain, Jesus instructed them not to tell anyone about what they saw until after his resurrection.
Okay, hold on. I've got a few questions.
Understandable, and so did the disciples. They asked Jesus about what they just saw, and Jesus helped them understand that it was just a glimpse of what would happen in the future. He would come back one day in his glorified body and bring about a new kingdom on the earth.
Dude, that sounds incredible. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, me neither, dude. The end.
Peter, James, and John got to see something absolutely incredible. Imagine being on that mountain with them. Jesus starts glowing, 2 other heroes of the Bible appear, and the voice of God rings out. What would your response be when all of this was happening? I would encourage you to pause the video here and take a couple of minutes to talk about that. Then, once you're done talking, unpause and continue the video. Our friend Pastor Andrew is going to be talking to us a little bit more about our story right now, so let's take a look.
Hey everybody, I've got a very special guest that's going to be hanging out with us today. Do you want to know who it is? It's Maggie. Yeah, super cute puppy today. We're going to be hanging out with her, but first, I want to set this up so everybody listen really carefully. From the very beginning of his ministry, Jesus spoke about a new kind of kingdom, a kingdom of love and kindness, a kingdom that valued the poor, weak, and insignificant. He taught about this beautiful kingdom in which people went out of their way to help others, a kingdom where God and people got to be together. This was a kingdom that no one had ever experienced before. But Jesus was also a king that nobody had experienced before. And Jesus the King said that this kingdom was here. In the story of the Transfiguration, we see Jesus going up on a high mountain, and on this mountaintop, we see him, the king of this new kingdom, transformed right in front of his disciples. He's glowing and then talking to these heroes of the Bible. They hear the voice of Almighty God. It's a crazy story, but what's going on here? Well, these few disciples got a little appetizer of what this new kingdom was going to be like. It was an amazing experience. Now, what God said on this mountain was super important. He said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." And then he says, listen to him. So listen to what? What did Jesus have to say? Well, as they were walking down the mountain, the very next thing Jesus said was, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." So God says, listen, and Jesus immediately begins talking about his death and resurrection. He's showing us that the way his kingdom works is through death and resurrection. Now, when I talk about death, I'm not necessarily talking about the blood and guts kind of death, but a different kind of death. Think of biblical death as separation, like being removed from something or giving something up. Now, remember that guest I was telling you about earlier? She's gonna help us out with this. So right here, I've got Maggie. Maggie is 3 months old and super cute, and like any puppy, she loves to play and chew on stuff. She especially loves to chew on bones. So right here, I've got this smaller bone. Let's see if she likes this one. Yeah, I'd say she likes this, don't you? But what if I have something else for Maggie? What if I have something even bigger and better for her? Now, do you think she'd like that big bone more? Yeah, of course she would. But before Maggie can have the big bone, she has to give up the little bone first. Let's see if she'll make the trade. Okay, Maggie, we know you like the small bone, but let's see if you're willing to give it up for the bigger one. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, give Maggie a round of applause. Now, when Maggie gave up the little bone, it's kind of like she died to this small bone. She was separated from this bone, but she was willing to give it up because she knew that there was a bigger and way better bone waiting for her. That's kind of like a resurrection. She got the bone back, but got a bigger and better one than before. That's how the kingdom of Jesus works. There are going to be plenty of times where we'll need to die to something, give up something because we love Jesus. Maybe it's a bad habit, an attitude, or a friendship that we need to separate from. And sometimes that can make us uncomfortable. What if instead of giving up that little bone, Maggie just kept it, growling and not letting go? That's what a lot of us do. We know that Jesus wants us to give up something, but we act like an angry dog and refuse to give up that thing. But here's the good news. We can always be confident that when Jesus tells us to give up something, to die to something, it's because he has something better for us. He has a resurrection waiting for us. We might get that resurrected thing back quickly, or it might take until we get to heaven. But when we die to something, there is always a resurrection. In just a moment, I want you to talk to your parents or small group leader about something that Jesus might be telling you that he wants you to separate from. But first, I want to remind you that we can always be confident to die to something for Jesus. How? Because this is what Jesus did for us. He actually physically died on the cross, and he actually physically rose from the dead to make a way for us to be a part of his new kingdom. Jesus did it all first. And if we know what Jesus has done for us, how he died in our place, then it should be an act of worship for us to die to that habit, that attitude, that time-wasting activity, that thing that's holding us back. We can be confident that the resurrected Jesus will bring that thing back to us, different, resurrected, and better than ever before. Every day, We can trust Jesus.
When we follow Jesus, there are times that we have to lay down or separate from some things, but this is always followed by a resurrection. Is there something that Jesus is asking you to separate from or lay down? I would encourage you to talk with your parent or small group leader about that. Remember, every day as we lay these things down, we can trust with Jesus there is always a resurrection. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.